Hello, 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 and welcome to the Blue Oval Podcast. I am Ben Weissel, and joining me, as always, Garrett Zatlin. How's it going, man?
Ben, I have very good news. My friends are gone. We can do this podcast in peace. We can keep it easy. So don't worry about them coming in. I know you were extremely concerned about that as much as I was, but we're in the clear for today.
What do you say to the allegations that you are referencing these friends so often to make it seem like you do have friends? I'm hearing some rumors that we might be overcompensating here.
Listen, your sources are trash. I don't know who's telling you this. All right, I'm really cool. Okay, my mom tells me that all the time. Okay, so really bogus sourcing there. Get your facts straight.
I'm glad to be back doing this in kind of a normal setting where neither of us have like any immediate deadlines or anything, so we
Right.
can kind of go through this, and we got a lot to get through. So I mean, we got some big coaching news. We have a
Mm-hmm.
big international transfer that will hit, and then we got our 15 through 8 team rankings on both the men and women's side. So we got a jam-packed episode for you. Before we get into that, I think we did not get any Apple or Spotify rating and reviews. I think we're stuck at 95 and 167 respectively from last week. We got a nice little bump last week. Let's give it another nice bump again this coming week. But Garrett, like I said, let's not beat around the bush. We got plenty to get to, and that first bit of news on the coaching front is Northern Arizona's Mike Smith has decided at the end of the 2024-2025 season, he will be taking a professional coaching job with Nike. And in extension, Jared Cornfield will be taking over as director at Northern Arizona. Immediate thoughts to this. I mean, this was something that I was a little bit in the ether. I think, and this makes a lot of sense why Cornfield did not leave for any other jobs, like maybe
You beat me
I
to it.
hypothesized. And obviously, Mike Smith has coached a lot of his former athletes professionally, so you could see that this was a possibility. Still, groundbreaking news for the best coach with the on the dynasty of our lifetime is leaving, and that brings a whole lot of uncertainty to the sport in general.
How surprised were you when you heard that news come out?
I think I was like a 7 or 8 because like there's no reason he couldn't have just kept coaching like his pro athletes in Flagstaff and coaching at NAU. But it
Let
seems
me
like
let
Mike
me
Smith's always
rephrase
beat
that.
by his own drum, so I think that's where it's a little less surprising.
Let me rephrase that. Okay, so when the initial shock is a surprise, or when you sit down and go through it, is it a surprise?
The initial, like it makes
Okay,
sense when you sit down and
right.
think about it. Like this was always going to be kind of his next job if he was going to take another job, right?
Yeah.
There probably wasn't. I always thought it was very unlikely that he would ever take another collegiate coaching position, at least right away from leaving NAU. So joining the professional ranks makes the most sense.
I really thought he would have gone to Oregon if that Oregon job was not going to go to
Interesting.
Schumacher, but um, I don't know. I felt like that was definitely the one collegiate program that he could have maybe fit in with. But yeah, I'm not surprised. Like like the initial shock. It's like, oh my gosh, this is happening. That certainly is a surprise. But let's go through four reasons why this is not a surprise.
Sure.
One, they already had conversations, Nike and Smith, a few years ago, and
Yeah.
actually Nike offered a contract to Smith, which he declined. So there had already been dialogue established. Two, what else does he really have to accomplish in the
Sure.
NCAA? If the women go on to win the national title this year, which they very easily could, I don't know, well, easily, your definition, I don't know, but like, what else would he have to do? So that's two. Three, Nico Young is his marquee athlete. Nico Young is now just turning pro. it is extremely difficult to envision a world where Nico and Smith are not attached at the hip, from a training and racing perspective. And then number four, which I forget what that argument even was to begin with, but there's a fourth point, I swear, and I think it just matches up and aligns extremely well. So,
And
yeah,
to your point, I think the caveat in there is that he's allowed to continue coaching
right,
athletes that are sponsored by other companies. I think was a very vital piece in probably ensuring that he would take this job. I'm not sure if he takes it otherwise. I don't know if that would have been a deal breaker, but it certainly, I think, made it that much more of an attractive offer where he could continue to coach guys that he's coached over the years, even though they're not sponsored by Nike.
yeah. I mean, I imagine Nike just came in and they're like, "We'll give you everything," and it's hilarious because my dad a month and a half ago, 2 months goes, "Hey, did you see this news article? It's about Nike, like basically coming out and saying, hey, we were behind the ball in terms of our investment in the running division when the pandemic struck, and actually a lot of
Mhm.
competition from the running perspective closed the gap there, and they said we're going to start reinvesting more heavily again." Wow. Well, wouldn't you know? It's all of a sudden they hire Mike Smith. And by the way, that fourth point, the NCAA is changing so rapidly.
I was going to mention that too. Yep.
The mid majors are going to get crushed. Now, NAU will have some perseverance. There's going to be clearly an investment into that cross country program. But I don't know if I'm Mike Smith, I don't know if I want to be recruiting against all these schools that, as we have seen, have been just grabbing every international standout that they can get. And so if there's ever a time for him to go, this is it.
Yeah, and I was going to mention that later too. That in a world that is becoming more and more professionalized, what really is the difference in terms of like
True.
coaching at the pro level versus the collegiate level, and in fact the pro level is going to have so many less strings attached to it. It's going to be so much easier. You're not going to have to deal with so many different bureaucracies, whether it's the school, it's the ncaa, like I think there are going to be some coaches that like are just tired of having to do all the recruiting, and decide to jump ranks to the professional side. I mean, there's only a select few that can do that, but I think we're seeing from Mike Smith that is more of an attractive position than maybe it was 6 months ago before all this the NCAA settlement stuff has occurred. Do we think, I mean, to that point, do we think we're going to see any other coaches kind of make this jump? As you were mentioning, Nike's seemingly pushing to regain a foothold, or not a foothold, but regain their uh,
Momentum.
clear superiority in the running arena. Do you think they're going to be targeting anybody else? Because when Bowerman's obviously dropped off with Schumacher leaving, On has really been on the rise with their OAC group, and there really isn't a marquee Nike group, and there used to be several. And so, do we think that there could be another domino to fall here?
Absolutely. Um, I talked to one coach who is really, they're just really well connected, and they really know a lot about these kind of nuances. What they had said, and again, I'm not reporting this, but this is just what some individual told me, and it was that Nike will probably move off of maybe the investment of the Union Track Club and
Yep,
Bowerman, and they want to apparently have flagship training spots in Flagstaff, which obviously, like I've been told by multiple people, they will have a pro group in Flagstaff. Nike will.
makes
Um,
sense.
and then they're going to have one in Park City, or they would like to have, I guess, one in Park City, Portland, and Boulder. Like that's essentially what they want to do is dominate the West Coast, or Western half, I should say, which would be pretty fun. I'm not gonna lie. Could you imagine if you're Boulder, you have what Colorado with an entire new coaching staff there and all these new transfers. You have On Athletics Club with all these Olympians, and then Nike just giving you like a double middle finger and being like, "We're also here." That would be a ton of fun. I can't lie.
Well, I think I had maybe mentioned something along that line when we were talking about the Carlson news about like
You did say that. Yeah, you
not
did.
necessarily. I mean, I mentioned that Carlson may be down the road, but
Right.
also just the fact that hey, I think Nike's probably going to set up shop there, or could look to set up shop there in the future, and maybe that's going to come sooner than we expect. So yeah, it's not a surprise. I think to those of us who have been paying attention to the sport that Nike is making a big push to reassert themselves, at least in American distance running, and really create marquee pro groups that are top of the line. And what better person to get to lead that push than Mike Smith? I think that's a perfect fit. Now let's talk about from like NAU's perspective. Obviously, losing Mike Smith, huge loss, and it's so interesting to me that NAU has had this like coach in waiting thing
Yep.
now
Yep.
twice with
Mhm.
when Mike Smith came on initially. And Coach Eric Hines was there for a year in his farewell year, and then they won the national championship. Now Mike Smith gets to have kind of his farewell season before Jared Cornfield gets elevated to the director role. What do we think this portends for NAU in the long term, though, with Cornfield at the helm?
It's tough because, like I mentioned, the NCAA landscape is changing dramatically, and he's going to be thrown into his first year as director is going to be the first year where all these changes are relevant.
Yeah,
It's not the same thing as Hines, giving Mike Smith a national title team.
yeah,
It's just not. And at least on the men's side, I should say, the women might actually still retain and you
yeah,
know be okay. But I don't know. I will say that like I don't know. I couldn't envision. I mean, you even saw on our Slack page how I was like, I don't know how anyone other than Cornfield could have possibly be that director role. I mean, there was no other question. He was easily the most deserving. It's
sure.
clear why there was no more pursuit of Colorado. So, excuse me. I, I don't know. I think he's it's in a tough spot because this is still a podium team, but is it a podium team next year too? And I don't think we have that answer yet.
Yeah, I think NAU is already staring down an uncertain future with Mike Smith. I mean, this was going to be clearly, I think, their worst team that they've had in years. Coming up, at least on the men's side, best team potentially that they've had on the women's side, as you mentioned. But with the new rules going into place, this was going to be like something that NAU was going to be affected by probably the most out of the top tier cross country programs, just because they're not connected to a major conference. And and that was going to be even with arguably the best coach in the sport. And now you throw in someone who has never been a director before, obviously has tons of experience with this program, leading this program in a variety of different ways, but has to learn to do that and learn all these new responsibilities of how to recruit in this new way. And I just think it, like you said, leads to a lot of uncertainty. And I think this gives the Oklahoma States, the BYUs of the world, like a chance to like grab a much more secure foothold to like the top of the NCAA picture over the next few years. And not to say that NAU can't get back there, but it seems like we're shifting into a non NAU era, and this kind of solidifies that in terms of like
Yeah,
winning national championships. I'm not saying
sure,
relevancy, but
sure. And I guess I can maybe see what you're saying, just in terms of strictly national titles.
yeah.
I also want to remind everyone they're still probably a podium team.
Oh
Again, like
yes,
they're
yeah.
still probably a podium team, and they might even still be next year. I haven't looked at the eligibility yet, but um, yeah, we'll see. I think Cornfield is the right call. There was no
Yeah.
other option that I would have even considered. But yeah, he's gonna have his work cut out for him, and I think he knows that. So, man, I love this sport. This is so great.
It's insanely fascinating. I mean, the amount of top tier jobs that have come up over the last like
Hmm.
5 years, pretty much every premium position that you could ask for in this sport has come up at some point in the last 5 years, which is
Yeah,
just staggering.
Oregon,
And
NAU, Colorado. Yeah,
yeah, it's been incredible. So We will see. It'll be, I mean, add an extra level of intrigue, I think, to watching NAU this year, knowing that it will be Smith's last with the program. But enough there. I'm sure we'll have more time to talk about NAU on the men and women's side when we get to their spots in our rankings. But before we get to those rankings, one other quick note that we wanted to bring up was Oregon landing a 142 800-meter runner, an Olympian from Kenya, Koitatoi, Kidali,
Sure. Let's just go with Kidali, his last
Kidali.
name.
So sorry
Let's do that.
for butchering your first name. Who was as I mentioned, he's run 142. Although, and I think this is well pointed out in the article that you wrote. He's only run under 145 once. Granted, he ran 142, but it's not as if this is someone who has a track record of consistency of running in that 142, 143, 144 level. Still, the talent is clear. Obviously, anybody who's making the Olympics in any distance event from Kenya is an absolute stud, and he, I think, comes in as the favorite for the 800-meter this coming year.
142 is such an absurd, like, in this is not the only guy. Now, granted, he's the most accomplished guy of all the internationals that are coming in, but like you can
Yeah.
see these all international recruits that, frankly, like with all the other content we have, we just can't keep up with, with every day of them, going to another program of West Virginia, Texas Tech, and Auburn, all collecting these names that are exceptional. And Kidali is like, I mean, like he is certainly like the marquee name, but like it feels like this is going to become the new normal. Like we're going to get guys like this. I'll be surprised if we don't get another guy like this before October.
I mean, like we've talked about before, there's like little to no risk for a lot of these international guys to come over. You're going to get paid. You basically be a professional athlete in America. You improve your overall stock in the U.S. market, which is going to then increase your ability to make more money in endorsement deals because you're just going to be a more well-known commodity. And so there really is only upside for a lot of these international runners to come over to the NCAA. And like you said, I think this is the new normal.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right, let's move off of that. Let's instead go to our rankings. We've got spots 15 to 8. Men or women? Where do you want to start first? Well, I guess it doesn't. I guess it doesn't matter. Actually,
well, we're going to start with the Oregon Ducks either way, and let's stick on the men's side. And this is just a really fascinating team. That they've obviously had a lot of guys come and go through the program. But I thought we saw some really interesting signs at the end of this last outdoor season where you saw kind of the young group step up. And I think that's what really gets you excited in the future of this program. You obviously have guys like Connor Burns, Simeon Bierbaum, who were the star recruits last year. But you have these other men. Why am I not remembering his name, from Florida? More 1500-meter guy.
From
At Oregon,
was he a recruit last year?
2 years ago. I think he.
Oh, Reinhard Harrison.
Yes, Reinhard Harrison. Thank you. Guys like him who are starting to really seemingly take the next step, and I think can add a little juice to this lineup that has some transfer additions that I think should bring a lot of stability.
Yeah, I mean, this team last year was all youth. I mean, there's a few occasional veterans thrown in there, but the core of that team that was going to really make that car go was the younger guys, and it just didn't work out. Now a lot of like those younger guys who we thought would develop, like Archie Noakes is gone. Josh Edwards apparently is no longer going to be competing. Someone told me he transferred to West Virginia. I'm not sure if that was actually the case or not. But yeah, a handful of departures were made, and like I think there was one of the steeplechasers left as well. So when I look at this team, I see that they bring in all the transfers, the veterans, the Devin Hart, Evan Dornkamp, the oh my gosh, who's the other name? That Evan
Evan
Bishop,
Bishop.
yep, and then Elliot Cook. It's a really strong four, but Hart has to be at his best, and I don't think we know if he will.
Yeah, I mean, Hart's just obviously a hard person to read at his best. He is a true low stick that is a game changer. But you don't always know how often you're going to see him at his best. What are your expectations for Cook this year? Because I mean, he was fantastic this last spring. Obviously, more of a middle distance runner. What do you think we can see from him this fall?
Top 90 guy,
Okay.
top nine. Like, if he finishes 84th at the national meet, 83rd, I'm not surprised. Anything past 70, I'll be a little surprised.
Yeah, and I think that's where you get to the issue with Oregon is like, all right, you really need Hart to be that low stick because who
Yeah.
else is really going to give you that? I mean, I think Bishop and Cook and Dorncamp can all be very solid contributors, top 100 finishers, but to expect them to be like fringe all Americans, I think is asking for a lot. And it's just hard to really finish that high up when you don't have someone like pushing at that higher like all American type of finish. If you only have, especially if you're relying on just one person to do that. So if they can at least get some consistency in that 2 through 5, and maybe one of their young like Beer Bomb or Burns really steps up and gives them a little more potency, that then I think they turn into a different team. And ultimately, I think that's how you see their youth movement is kind of the Rorschach test of how you see this team and where they should be ranked.
I completely agree. Completely agree. Before we go, what's their ceiling?
You see, and just based off of that, I think they can be a top 10 team if some of their young guys come together and all of a sudden you have 5 guys in the top 100, even if you
But
don't.
how high? How high in that top 10?
I think maybe like seventh or
I
eighth.
would have said seven. Yep, seven or eight.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool.
All right,
But
let's go
go ahead.
on the other side of the team for Oregon, and on the women's side, we also have them ranked 15th. Now, again, an interesting team where you got a lot of uncertainty after a couple spots. We really like Maddie Elmore, and we think she can be a very good low stick for this team. And then you have some talented runners, but ones that you're not sure where they're going to fit in during this fall season. Chief among them are Salon Ayildes, who, I mean, her 5K this past spring would indicate that she should be ready to be a huge contributor in cross country. We kind of need to see that. Mia Barnett rounding back into form during this past spring. Can she get back to that 44th place finish that she had at NCAA's a couple years ago? And then you have some other options. Dalia Frias came in, and then he got just a bunch of question marks from there on out. What do you see about this team or what can make this team go from good to great, like we were just talking about on the men's side?
Um, all the questions being answered favorably.
Yeah.
Which I know that's a weird way to put it, but Solana Yildiz, we don't really know exactly how effective she's going to be in cross country. 15:15 suggests that she's going to be like an All American. She ran 15:15 in the 5K. Suggest that she'll be an All American. But her postseason, anything
Yeah.
past that wasn't exactly ideal, and her cross country resume is bare. Um, Mia Barnett didn't race last fall, and she's been good on the track, but we really haven't seen her in anything past the 3K, and we don't really know what her long distance fitness is like right now. Maddie Elmore didn't race in the postseason this past spring. You can't help but wonder if that was an injury. In fact, I think it was. Don't quote me on that, but if it was, then how extensive was that injury, right? Dalia Frias, she's been injured. Like, she's been in a boot. And that was earlier this summer. So is she even going to be racing? Victoria Patterson, she's not listed on the roster anymore. She's off. And you had, all these different women who have a bunch of question marks around them, just beyond some of the women who I already talked about. And half of those questions are going to be answered favorably. Does that put them as a top 10 team? It could, but there are a lot of head scratching parts of the squad.
Yeah, and the name I keep coming back to is Claudia Kazmierska. Like, she just feels like she should be better in cross country. She just ran, what was it, four flat, 359?
359.95.
359 in the 1500 meters. I mean, you would have to imagine that's going to translate somehow this fall and at least be a scoring option for them. But we just haven't seen it from her yet, so it's hard to say that that's going to happen. But I mean, you go through this whole roster, and there is so much talent. I mean, a lot of it is middle distance talent, which again is where it gets a little bit harder to see how that translates on the grass. But yeah, the uncertainty here, I think, led us to a perfect spot in the rankings where it's just like right in the middle. Because truthfully, you could go a lot of different. This team could go in a lot of different directions.
Yeah, and like they've got a great recruiting class, but they also had great recruiting classes previously, and
Yeah,
like
they always do.
we haven't seen Kate Peters, we haven't seen Lily Cridge. Like we don't, where are they? And so it's just a challenging team to figure out. They might be awesome, or they might fall out of the top 20. I don't really know. So that's my Oregon take.
So yeah, let's head to the men's back to the men's side, and our number 14 team is Harvard. They obviously bring back one of the favorites to take home, if not the favorite, depending on who you ask, to take home the NCAA individual title in Graham Blanks. They do lose Acer Iverson, but they do bring in they do bring back some very strong, capable scoring options. In Ben Rosa in particular, and as well as Shane Brosnan.
How much do you like this team?
See, this is a classic team of like I'm probably going to be pretty underwhelmed by them for the entire regular season,
They're going to
and
be great at the national meet.
art yeah, argue that they should be ranked, like, should drop in our rankings, and then they get to the national meet and they are right around this ranking because you're going to score a point or two with your top scorer, and then you're going to have like some very solid top 100-ish kind of names, and that's just going to mathematically land you right around 14.
I think the opposite happened last year. But although in the lead up to that year, you're right, that is what happened. They've been
Yeah.
like beating expectations. Blanks is great. I trust Rosa. I don't trust anyone else. I think like they all could have like legitimate impacts, and they've shown different aspects of really great promise. But there are certain guys where I'm just like, you had one great race at Nuttycombe, and
Yeah.
then after that. Um, so I don't know how much I love them at 14. Do I think they should be ranked? Do I think they're top 20? Yeah, I definitely do. Um, but they're a tricky team for me to figure out. That, of course, but like you said, mathematically, if you have Graham Blanks, like the math is very favorable. Like especially if Rose is going to be a top 50 guy or top 60, whatever. So like the math really, like, they would have to borderline collapse
Yes.
to fall out of the top 20 essentially.
Exactly, and I think that's ultimately why it's like, sure, maybe they post some underwhelming results at Nuttycombe or Pre-Nats or something like that, but I ultimately trust Coach Gibby. I trust that they just have the talent on this team from some very good recruiting classes over the years, and then you really only need like to find three solid, like just not bad options. Like they don't even need to be good. They don't necessarily even need to be okay. They just need to be not horrible. And this is going to be a team that is in the top half of the national meet.
It's like my mom asking me about a girlfriend. She's like, she just doesn't have to, she just can't be horrible. That's it. Like, that's it. So, no, only kidding. but, but yeah, that's pretty much it. And I don't know how else. That's better to describe that than that. That's it.
All right. Well, why don't we move on to number 14 on the women's side, and that is the Stanford Cardinal. Why don't you take the ball on this one and let me know what you're interested in seeing from this team this year?
Um, we we've always been super high on their talent,
Yes.
and it just never gets across the line. They were probably a podium team last fall, and then they faded to what, 12th? Something like what? I don't even know where they were, where they finished at the national meet. I'm looking it up now. Um,
12th, yeah.
is it 12th? Yeah. And I'm just like, man, there. I don't know what's missing because they were a great team last year. I thought Bunnage gave them a true low stick. I thought they had a really excellent core of three in that middle, super
Hmm.
stable. It might have been one of the best middle lineup cores I've seen. And then a passable fourth, fifth scorer was great. And so I thought that lineup would have been effective. I would have liked them to get like kind of like another low stick there. But now they lose two of those three core members, and I'm left like trying like to piece the puzzle, put the pieces of the puzzle together, and I can do it, but it doesn't look pretty. Does that make sense?
Well, I think the picture can look quite pretty because there's the potential. And you look
Sure.
at a lot of these scoring options, and they have very high ceilings. I mean, whether that's Bunnage, Sophia Kennedy. I mean, even Sophia Dudek, if she's back at her best. I mean, Riley Stewart, if she's running well, she's not like, going to be a top option, but when she's running well, she's someone that can be a very capable fourth or fifth runner, on top of those top three that I just mentioned, who are all very capable of being all American type of runners.
Do you- in terms of like the recruits, I don't see any like exceptional long distance cross country recruits here. Like,
No, which is very strange.
yeah, that is very strange, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because it's a younger roster, um, ish. But I think the other big part of this is, where's Irene Riggs?
Yes.
Where is she? Like, I'm hopefully she's healthy and she'll race this fall. Um, but man, that'd be really really nice for Stanford to have her, because if she enters the lineup, I mean, they're easily a top 10 team. But we didn't see her at all over the last year.
I mean, it's not a stretch to say they have four possible All Americans
Oh
this
yeah,
year,
yeah, for sure.
and it's very crazy to put that kind of team at 14th. But it's absolutely the right spot because you can only really feel truly, truly like confident that one of them is going to be an All American.
Yeah,
You feel pretty good about two, and then three and four, you're just kind of like, they have the talent,
yeah,
but
yeah.
we have no idea if they're in that type of fitness at the moment. So yeah, they're just such a fascinating team, tantalizing team. There always is a Stanford team, it seems like, whether it's on the men or women's side, that just give us headaches and like make us so excited with their potential. And this year, I think it's on the women's side.
Well, to be clear, it's you specifically. I mean, I'm
Yes, that's
along
true.
for the ride, but it is you who is taking the brunt of this. So it's okay. I'll let you go on that one. Let's move off of 14. Let's head to 13. And this is my team.
Yes,
This
it
is
is.
my team. This is the Butler Bulldogs. I want to say right now, this is my team, okay? I've been invested in them for like 2 years. I've seen the future, I've seen the vision. This is the vision. I hope to God it works out. I really do. They've got Florian Lepellic as their low stick. Jesse Hamlin could come back and be a secondary low stick. He is expected to return. Then Will Zagarsky and Matthew Forrester are the crucial 3-4 of this lineup. If they deliver on some of their upside, and they've been inconsistent at times, but if they deliver on their upside, this team is going to be a top 10 squad, unquestionably. And then the depth is way better than some people realize, like way, way better. I think they're a complete team. I think they're a balanced team. I think they have all the right components that you need to be a good squad. I could see them realistically reaching seventh or eighth in our rankings.
Who do you think is the most important runner on this team?
Probably Zagarsky.
Okay. I think it's
Yeah,
Hamlin because I
I wasn't sure.
I think because we've seen the potential, like we've seen those really like impressive track times, but we haven't quite seen that translate to the highest level on the grass. And if it does, then hey, like I agree, yeah, secondary low stick right there, and this is a team that all of a sudden becomes much more dynamic, and a much higher ceiling than I think I am at with them at the moment. But if he's just like a solid like piece, I do struggle to see them reaching the heights that maybe you're expecting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the firepower needs to be better, like unquestionably. And this goes for Lepellic too. Like he's
Yeah.
been good. He's even been very good. He's occasionally been great, but he's never been amazing. And he has to be at least really great in order for this team to reach where I think they potentially could. Now, I do think he has the potential to do so, and I think he's shown flashes of that. But like the national meet has to be better, and he just has to put this team just has to have more firepower, or everyone collectively improves enough to the point where they're making up whatever that needed margin is. So that's it.
Yeah, because I do think the depth is, like you said, is better than you expect. They have a group of guys that you feel comfortable that at least one of them is going to take a big enough step forward and fill in that fifth spot, right?
Yeah.
Pretty capably. So that's not really a concern for me. It ultimately does come down to, hey, what are your best guys giving you? Because I don't necessarily see this group being someone that can have like a ton of guys just like right in that top like 80 or 90 that really boosts this team more than like despite not having a true low stick.
All right, I'm moving us off of Butler and onto number 13, Tennessee. Tennessee women. Lose Carlson. They lose Jesse Secor. They more or less bring back everyone else, I think. I'm not sure about Callie Tucker, but they bring back everyone else. And they were sixth at last year's national meet, which was phenomenal, outstanding, a massive shattering of expectations. They were not the sixth best team in the country throughout most of last fall. This is a meet us in the middle ranking. I think this is appropriate. I think it's fair, especially considering when you lose your coach and a top five scorer. Fair?
Absolutely, and I liked the new addition with the coaching staff of Justin Duncan. I think he's going to do very well. But I agree. You're turning over your coaching staff. You are talking about a team that was not deserving of a top. Well, I don't even know what they were ranked coming into the national meet, but probably not within our top
I
15.
don't think it was even top 20. I'm not
Yeah,
even sure it
and
was.
so I mean, you're talking about a team that is before the national meet. Like we would have probably, if they hadn't had that performance, we would have had them 10 spots back probably in our rankings. And obviously, the national meet is the most important race of the year, so we're gonna wait towards that. But I don't think we can assume that they're gonna catch lightning in a bottle 2 years in a row. I think they're going to be good, and I think they clearly showed a step that they progressed to a different level over the postseason, which is why they're ending up at 13, and I think they're capable of being a top 10 team. But with all the turnover and having the expectations of trying to reach that high finish that they had last year, I just don't see them coming anywhere near where they were a year prior.
Correction, I was wrong. They were 18th going into the
Okay.
national meet, which is almost a perfect now medium in retrospect.
Yeah.
But what is their ceiling?
I mean,
Is it
sixth,
six?
like,
I do. I think it's six. I think it's like six. Yeah.
yeah, I clearly like again they do miss a scorer from last year, but like you can see there's people that can step up and replicate that scoring. everybody just has to have a perfect day once again. Like,
Yes,
and
yet
hey,
again.
you're back in sixth.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's a fun team. Like it's a really fun team. I like it a lot, and I like that they were all kind of like, "Hey, we have a great team here. Let's just stay." Like I that was kind of something that I wish the New Mexico women did. And so I kind of like that Tennessee's doing it, and I hope it works out for them because like the loss of Secor is not great, but Kayla Galar is a really really good six like runner for them last year, and I think she's more than adequate, or not even adequate. She's plenty good enough to be that fifth scorer, or maybe even jump in the fourth scoring spot. So yeah, I think the floor for this team, like I would be surprised if they fall out of the top 15.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's fair. They have a level of stability. I think
Mhm.
that um, should suit them well over the next couple months. Let's go on to the men's side at number 12, and that is the Wisconsin Badgers. This is a team that lost some key scorers in Jackson Sharp and Evan Bishop. They showed signs last year as a team that they were going to be quite dangerous going into the national meet. Ultimately, finished 10th. Now they do have Bob Liking, who is going to be a great, should be a great low stick for them. Hasn't had a great national meet yet, but has done basically everything else that you would want from a good cross country runner. He's there. They have some other options to fill in behind them. Adam Spencer returns. Rowan Ellenberg, who I think we both really like,
Mhm.
returns. And then they have some new guys that can come in and really fill out the scoring well. I think you were highest on Wisconsin out of our
I
group.
was.
What is the exciting part about them going into the year?
It's not necessarily what's exciting, it's about what scares me. And that's McBurn and their history. Um I just I just struggle to believe that like I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know how they're going to be a top 10 team again. I think they really could be. And I feel almost like more confident than not that they will. I think there's at least enough of a core where you have a low stick, you have a great supporting cast of middle lineup scorers, and you should have enough. And there should be one guy who was great on the track. Like I think Johnny Livingston is probably due for a breakout season. I think Logan Meisner could, translate his steeplechase success. I think Michael Wilson may be due. I think Oliver Pauline may be due. Maybe Josh Truchon could be more consistent and replicate his national meet performance on a more consistent basis. And Adam Spencer is a 331, 1500 guy, an
Yeah.
Olympian. Man, what like he's been pretty solid on the grass, even if he
Yep.
rarely ever races. So I it's more of a respect thing for why I'm so high on them than a what I than like what is seen on paper.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they got a lot of options. I mean, you just ran through a bunch of names. I mean, we feel pretty good about what their top three or four could be. But then you got like five or six guys that you could see slotting in for that final spot or two in the scoring lineup. And this is a program, like you've mentioned, that has been excellent for so many years. And it would be stunning to see them fall much further than 12th, quite frankly. Like, I mean, I don't think, I think this is a team similar to what we were just saying about Tennessee, where I would be stunned if they were outside our top 15 at really any point during the rankings and certainly at the national meet. I think they're going to be very solid. And similar to the Tennessee women, I don't know what if they have much higher of a ceiling than just being like a fringe like contender for a podium spot. So right around that 6-7 spot, because I don't know if they have like that second like all American guy that can really push them into that conversation. But I think this is just a very stable team with the cast of options that they can rotate through until they find their perfect lineup.
Yeah, I mean, don't be wrong. It's not like this team's like invincible historically either. I mean, like I'm looking at this now. They didn't qualify for the 2017 national meet, which I think I remember that being like a big, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
can't believe they didn't qualify. And then in 2019 they were 18th. But in the last 2 years they've been top 10, and I just I just don't believe that this team has a lot of like I don't think anything that they do is going to be a fluke. You know,
No.
does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. We have a track record, whether it's the program or the individual runners that would say, "Hey, we could have seen this coming."
Yeah. Yep. I agree. All right. I'm taking us over to the Virginia women. We're heading over there to number 12. I kind of struggled to place this team. I think they're in the right
Yeah.
range, but they could have been anywhere from like 9 to 15. And I don't think any of us at TSR would have been like, arguing about it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, a similar structure to some of the teams that we've talked about. You have a pretty good you have a great low stick in Margot Appleton, and then you have some decent kind of middle scorers.
You also have Jenny Schilling.
Yeah, you have Jenny Schilling as well. You're right. I did miss her, and then you got like Carolina Tim. You got Sophia Atkinson, Cameron Menninger. You got some pieces that have been around and can give this team a certain floor. I'm curious where you think their ceiling is, and who's that runner that can kind of get them there.
What is their ceiling? I don't know. I just don't feel comfortable like talking about this team because I just don't feel like I really know what I'm
Yeah.
getting. Like on paper, they're extremely complete and they're very balanced. And I guess the runner who I'm looking for is it Tim? Is
I
it
think it's
Atkinson?
Tatum David.
It might be Tatum David. Yeah, she hasn't raced though, and that's what.
I
Well,
know that's
she didn't race in the fall, and she only raced sparingly in the spring.
and that goes to your point of like not feeling comfortable talking about this team is
Right.
the person that can take this team from good to great is someone who hasn't ever raced for this team in cross country. And I mean she comes in with fantastic PRs from the high school level, 4:35 in the mile, 9:48 in the 3,200. She has the talent. We just need to see it. And I think she's that one person where it's like we haven't seen enough to know to be able to put like a ceiling on her. And what she's shown in terms of her high school performances would indicate that she has a potential of pushing towards an all American level. And if she can do that, then all of a sudden you're looking at three women that can go toe to toe with almost anybody in the country. And that's when this team gets really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot to mention Mary Ellen Udele, who was a transfer from Arkansas,
Right.
also came over. She'll be a
Yeah.
nice depth piece as well. Yeah, I think Schilling and Appleton will be All Americans again. Well, Appleton was not an All American, but I think they will be All
Could be.
Americans.
Yep.
I just think it's the middle portion of that lineup. Like, what is Atkinson, Menninger, and Tim going to give me? The best version of those women is like this is a borderline top five team, but I don't know what we're going to get out of them. We don't know what we're getting out of Tatum David. We don't know what some of the younger athletes are going to do. We don't know what Ellen. Well, I think we know what Ellen Udele will do, and
Yeah.
it's just tough to gauge, and that's it.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Why don't we move on to number 11 on the men's side, and that is Wake Forest. It's a very young group that turned over so much of of its roster last year after losing a lot of its core veterans that pushed them to a fifth place finish in 2022. And yet, I think it's pretty wild to say that you were almost more excited in what you saw in 2023 than what you saw in 2022, despite them finishing ultimately fifth. And that's because they showed so much potential. And first among that was Rocky Hansen, who just had a breakout freshman year and looks like one of the up and coming stars of the sport. He was just fantastic in the couple big races he ran. Of course, did not run at NCAA's, but came back during the spring, ran some decent times as well. And then you just got a lot of young guys behind him who have shown a lot of potential. You still have Luke T-Walt, who has been one of the more versatile runners, I think, in the country as well. his capabilities in the 15 and the 5K are very strong. And then they've had so many good recruiting classes that you just have so many talented guys that are ready to step up, you think, and really make a big impact in this year and next.
Who outside of Rocky Hansen is your favorite runner? And B, who is the most important runner?
Ooh, I think my favorite is Joseph O'Brien.
I agree.
I
Yep.
I just he wasn't flashy, but he was just darn good every every
Mhm.
race,
Yep.
like, especially for someone as young as he is. I think he's super underrated. The most important, I think it might be T-Wall because
I
I think
agree. Yes.
if he can be that, like, secondary low stick for this team, which I think he kind of has the potential to if things go right. He brings this team up a notch this year and kind of maybe accelerates where they thought they could finish coming into the year.
Yeah, I mean, in 2022, he was an All-American, a top 30 All-American. So,
Yeah.
like we know he can do it, but the last year has been a little rough. He's, I think, hit a few injuries. And so if he's back in top form, then yeah, this guy changes everything. But regardless, take him out of that. I mean, this team is so young and so raw in terms of fitness. And now they have another year of experience. And now they're getting Rocky Hansen back for the postseason. Here's a fun fact. If you had if you had brought Hansen into the lineup and if he had placed 20th at the national meet last year, Wake Forest jumps from 24th to 16th place, which is really impressive. Like, really impressive. There's no way that this team doesn't get better. And I think that this will be a positioning year where they will position themselves for a podium run and, dare I say, a national title run in 2025 and 2026.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, just adding him in obviously gets them into near that top 15 range. And then you would expect internal improvement to push them the rest of the way towards that top 10. I mean, they're not losing anybody. And in a year when so many of the top teams, at least on the men's side, are losing multiple people, I think that's just going to very naturally push them up to this 11th spot. So if they even improve more than we're expecting, this ranking could ultimately even look low.
Um, yeah, completely agree. I think that's kind of all we've had there. I'm not going to keep us rolling, keep us moving on to New Mexico at number 11 for the women. New Mexico, Pamela Kazi comes in. Mercy Kurari, is that it? Mercy Kurari joins the team as well. She was a 15. What did she run? She ran
49.
1540s. Yeah, 49. Thank you. In the 5K, and then they also have Nicola Jansen. The depth, so that's the big three is their identity, but the depth is
Yeah.
better than you'd think. And the math suggests that they're probably closer to like seventh or eighth. I think there's a ton of question marks as to like how will certain women translate, but I don't. It's not like a ton needs to go right in order for this team to find success.
Yeah, I mean, if Kazgai comes in and is someone that we think can pretty easily challenge for a top 5 spot, then I think that it makes them a pretty cut and dry, like, top 10-ish team. Because like you said, they have Nicola Jansen who stepped up in a big way, was an All-American last year. What do you think she has another little mini jump in her? Do we think she could be like a top 20-ish runner? I mean, it's hard to say. She made such strides this past year. I think I hate to put a ceiling on her, but I feel like it would be we're going to see pretty much the same this year. Would be my guess.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. I don't
Yeah,
expect her to make another leap as well. Like I don't really see her ever being a top 10 runner. Could she be a top 20? Sure, maybe she cracks the back end, but she just does. She doesn't need to be anything more than what she was last year.
sure.
She does what she does last year. Then this is a fantastic team. It's Mercy Karari who we have questions about, and then the rest of this lineup. Now there are a ton of depth pieces. I mean, I can go down the list. I mean, Tilly Simpson, the transfer from Michigan, and then Sophie McDonald, and oh my gosh, who else am I even thinking of? I'm completely
Clara
blanking.
Des,
Yeah,
Natalia Badetti.
Yeah, Natalia Battetti, and these are all good names. And like one of those names is going to catch, and they're going to be a great serviceable back end scorer. It's just about everyone else as well.
Yeah, so I think ultimately, I guess the thing you should, if you're tuning in, that you're getting out of this is, hey, if Mercy Karari is good and that like top 80, top 100 good. This is a team that is going to be right around this top 10 range. And I think she's ultimately going to be the X factor if she can kind of live up to some of the track potential that we've seen. Then I think she gives them just a level of potential that they wouldn't have otherwise outside of their top two. And because, yeah, like you said, we just ran through a bunch of names who we think are going to be good enough in that 4 and 5 spot to at least give themselves a chance.
Quick shout out to Darren Gosson. I mean,
Yeah.
we thought New Mexico was dead. We thought they're like, well, the reign is over. New Mexico Lobos no longer going to reign supreme. They add another piece. I mean, they're a borderline podium squad. I mean, it's pretty scary
Yeah.
what they can do. So, yeah, I will just say this: they're not dead. In fact, they're only growing. So, watch out for them. But all right, I'm moving us off. We're going to 10 on the men's side. Virginia, and last year's ranking, which we gave them at preseason number 8, was a little bit eager. Uh, but now I think they're going to be, I think, a little bit more refined, a little bit more polished. They'll have a little more consistency. I think we're going to get a better version of Gary Martin in the postseason. Will Anthony's going to be that low stick. Nathan Mountain could translate the steeplechase success. And then there's a ton of guys who could fill in for the rest of the squad. They don't lose a ton. Um, I think the only guy they lose is Yassine Sato.
Yeah.
So it's a good team. But last year we were like, where's the umph? And we never got the umph. And the back end scoring was, well, there was significant gaps.
Yeah, there really wasn't any. And I think the reason why we ranked him as high is a lot of the reasons we like him again this year is these same guys that we're expecting to kind of take a step forward in the cross country season, and we truthfully just didn't really see that. We saw Gary Martin kind of flash a little bit, but then fade at the end of the year. And then Will Anthony was and Nathan Mountain were solid, but not great. And obviously Mountain coming off of another great steeplechase season. Will Anthony was just good all around. And then Martin was excellent in the middle distances. If those three guys can be what we hope they can be, then they can really lead a very potent Virginia team. But they're going to need to be because while they
Yeah.
do have options behind them, the options behind them aren't going to be like overwhelming, like pushing them in any direction. They're going to basically just make sure they don't fall any further at nationals than they should. It's ultimately going to be those top three that decide their season.
Before we transition, who's the most important guy on Virginia's team?
On what?
On Virginia's team, who's the most important guy?
Um, Man, you can make a really good case for any of those top three. I'm gonna go with Mountain
I agree.
because I think he has the most untapped potential on the
Yep,
grass. I think if he gets to the level that his 820 in the steeplechase would indicate, they are a significantly better team.
I agree. I agree. All right, I'm moving us off. We're going to Utah women at number 10. And this team, it is very scary. I mean, they were not supposed to be good last year, like at all. And I think we put them as like an honorable mention team, and then they finished what, like 13th at the national meet. And even then, I'm still like, man, well, maybe they could have been better. And this year we have them at 10. Michaeli Caesar comes back. Morgan Jensen comes back. Anastasia Peters comes back. Peters and Caesar are like a lethal 1-2. Jensen was great, just as a steady, super consistent scorer. Katarzyna Nowakowska, I'm gonna say that I nailed that.
Sure.
Um, she had moments where she was really, really great last year. And I just think there's a lot of really solid women. like including like Lindsay Peters, who like back in 2022, 2021 was like a top 30 some finisher at Nuttycombe. They
Mhm.
bring in a Czech Republic steeplechaser in Sona Korlova. Sorry if I'm butchering that. 956 in the steeplechase. There are a couple things that need to hit, but they also like a handful of these women like Caesar and Jensen were awesome in the 10K. They were outstanding unattached this past spring. So I, I'm almost a little scared of us putting them at 10 because I don't know if I think they could be higher.
Truthfully, I think they probably should be. Like I think they just you have a baseline that you feel quite comfortable with in like Caesar, Peters, and Jensen. And then you have a lot of talented options behind. I mean, like having a 956 steeplechaser as kind of like, oh yeah, like maybe she can like fill out the scoring. Like that is not something a lot of teams can say. And obviously this program has a track record of exceeding expectations. And they've been better than we've expected more often than not. And I wouldn't be stunned to see us get midway through the season and have them closer to the podium than we do like 11th or 12th. And so I think as long as they can take some of their women can take it just a small step forward, and it doesn't have to be huge. Just kind of they don't have to continue the insane growth curve that they were on last year, but they just take the logical next little step forward. I think you're seeing a team that just is complete and has firepower up front as well.
Yeah, I think the problem that I think I had personally was what is what should we value? What is fair or what is correct? Like what is deserved or what is correct, right? Like because the arguing that they should be ranked higher then suggests that they are natural. Like this is how logic works, that they are better than the 9, 8,
Yeah,
7, whatever teams you want to put in front of them. And so it does feel like they should be ranked higher. But then I looked at all the other ones and I go, well, what is the argument against the ones in front of them? And is the ones in front of them are those arguments as like good enough to like move them back? And then I don't think they were. And I don't know, maybe it's just we get distracted by like Utah's not exactly like been a NAU or NC State kind of
sure.
program. And so maybe it's a little odd to put them that deep in the top 10, although you could certainly say that about our number 9 team and I would have no answer to that. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think this goes to show that I think the women's side, you get through. There's 10 or so teams that you feel a lot better about. Like there's kind of a tier, I think that is a little bit deeper than at least of what we've seen on the men's side. And in a lot of years, I think we would have had Utah ranked higher. So let's go on to the men's side. At number 9, we have the North Carolina Tar Heels. Again, bring back a lethal front group. They do lose Alex Phillip and Jake Gebhardt, but they do have Parker Wolf and Ethan Strand. Wolf will challenge for the individual title this year, we expect. And then you have Strand, who just gets better and better, it seems, every year. And then they bring in Max Murphy, who I think we both really like and is very underrated and hopefully can fill in one of those scoring spots and give this team the consistency that Alex Phillip gave them last year, and they're going to be sorely missing.
yeah, I mean Murphy fills the Gebhardt's role, maybe not entirely, but pretty close, like enough to be like, okay, it's whatever. Not having Phillips stinks. Like it's
Yeah,
really, really hard. Now the good news is that I think the back end's going to be better this year, and that's because they'll have Will Coogan and Patrick Anderson at least healthy enough to compete and be somewhat competitive. For those who don't know, I think over a year ago, a year and a half ago, Coogan and Anderson were in a severe car accident, like borderline fatal, and they actually, had to miss semesters of school, and they couldn't be with the team, and they were in the hospital for extended stays, at least for Anderson, I think. And, like, I think it's a big question of like, well, man, what are they capable of doing? Right? Because are we going to get the peak form of them back? I don't know if that's necessarily fair to put that expectation on them, but man, even if they just are serviceable back end guys, then they'll at least chip away at the gap that Phillip left behind. They won't entirely replace it, but they'll at least chip away at that. And I think that's why we can still, you know, justify putting him in the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, if they're like top 125 finishers at nationals, I think you would probably take that,
Mhm.
and at least give them some level of a decent floor. And that was, I mean, last year that fifth spot was kind of like you just shrug your shoulders and hope that it worked out. And more often, and sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. And I think you're right in pointing out that hopefully they have at least a little bit better of an option to fill out that fourth and fifth spot, even if their third isn't quite as high up as it was last year.
Yeah, I mean, Colton Sands has been a really nice outdoor track season. Like, I think he's going to be much improved. I think he'll be a very serviceable fourth scorer. I'm actually kind of encouraged by what we've seen. It's that fifth spot. And so we'll see what happens real quick. The Anderson Coogan duo there, if I came to you and I said, you have North Carolina's squad, you can either get a fifth man who is guaranteed to place between 100 and 125th at the national meet, or that I can give you a guy who it's a 50-50 shot of him being a top 70 runner, or they're going to finish outside of the top 140. Which runner for this team do you take?
I actually think I would go for the upside and go for the top
So do
70
I.
because I think like we're saying I think there are more options for that fifth spot. Last year you would have picked the like 100th to 125th guy. This year I think that would be more advantageous for them to go for the upside.
Yeah, this is, I think, their last chance for a year or two at least to get on the podium. So, all right, we're moving off. Going to number 9, we're going to Lipscomb, which is not a team I ever expected to talk about in our top 10 portion of the rankings. An A Sun school that you competed against, correct?
Yeah, it's really gonna hurt me to say a lot of nice things about Lipscomb because we hate Lipscomb as Belmont. I'm wearing a Belmont shirt, and I'm gonna spend about 5 minutes just saying how good Lipscomb are, and it's all gonna be true, and I'm not gonna like any of it.
Well, I'll start for you, okay? Lydia Miller was able to be a low stick last fall and an All American. Kira Carter could potentially be a low stick after a great outdoor track season. Mackenzie Barrett was 53rd at Nuttycombe and had a really few great flashes. She could potentially take a small step up to be a fringe low stick this year. They have Leonie Saurer, who was a freshman who ran 10:08 in the steeplechase this past spring and qualified for the national meet. And then they bring in Linda Perez, a sub 33 10K runner who admittedly hasn't really done anything or at least much on the grass, but you throw her into the equation, and this team is ridiculously deep. I don't even know if their 1549 girl is going to is going to be a scorer at times. Like it's is it Borland? And that's just a ridiculous group. This group is stupid deep. Like I don't know how Coach Polk at Lipscomb did this. It's really impressive.
I have nothing but like great things to say about their coaching staff. They have been great. One of my buddies was a volunteer assistant there for a year, and I mean the things that he would tell me, like the type of training and the type of coaching that they get is amazing, and you're seeing the results over the last year. Obviously, like just running through some names here. You mentioned Lydia Miller. I mean, she's going to be like another real true low stick, I think, this year. And Kiara Carter, like this outdoor season, what she was arguably one of the best stories of the season. I mean, to run 409, to run 202, and I think there's a lot of room for her to get even better in cross country and be kind of a fringe, I dare say, All American if she's at her best. And then Leonie Sorer, like if she can translate some of her track times into what into onto the grass, she could also be someone that we're talking about as finishing out a really potent trio. There's just a lot of things to like in this team.
I completely agree. A few other names here before we move on. Harley Kletz, she was sneaky good as a stable scorer last year. Liza Corso stepped in. Ellie Brewer had some national meet experience. Um, I just, man, I really like this team. I don't know how much firepower they're going to have relative to some of the teams ranked ahead of them, and I think that's why we're maybe putting them at 9. But man, this is a really good team, and yeah, I'll move off of it so that you don't have to talk about them anymore. But great team, and so we'll move to 8. Notre Dame Men, and I just published this one today. How like guess how many quote unquote low sticks they could have if everyone is firing on all cylinders. Everyone.
Ooh, all right. Methner, Mari.
Mm. Oh, I don't even think Mari's back.
Oh, is he not back? Okay. Yeah, you're probably right. Um, Carter Solomon, uh, CJ Singleton. Is that? I think that might be it. Am I missing somebody?
I think again, if everything goes perfectly right and everything works out, I think you could get Solomon, Methner, Singleton, Coleman, Sturry, and Drew Griffith.
You're really stretching out the if
I
everything
know,
goes
I
well.
know,
I
I
hear you.
know, but like, and I even say like, hey, if everything goes right, I think of oh gosh, where is this article that I just pulled up? But I basically at the end of the article I say, if everything goes right, space indented on its
And
own,
I
and
mean,
I mean everything, then this team can get on the podium. The problem is that Solomon has not been himself over the last year. Methner is on and off availability in terms of health. Sturry, we don't know what version of him we're going to see after a really odd year at Oregon. Is Drew Griffith even going to run this season? Will he be redshirted? And if he does run, just how good is he going to be? Singleton, does Singleton take the next step up? Does Coleman take the next step up? Do they just replicate what they did last year? So that's why it's not realistic to suggest that everyone's going to do that.
no.
I think a phenomenal, like a phenomenal year would be if 4 of those guys work out. I think it's more realistic to think
Oh yeah.
that 2 or 3 of those guys are going to be, borderline low sticks. And so that's what makes this team very, very tricky.
Yeah, the Isaiah Sturry thing is like, how often have you ever seen someone transfer away and then transfer back? I mean, that quickly too. It's just so interesting, and yeah, I mean, he has a boatload of talent. I mean, can be an All American if he's at his best. And then yeah, I mean, Drew Griffith's coming in from the high school side. I mean, Foot Locker champ. I mean, there's a pretty good track record of those guys doing well. Whether it's in the first year, that's a little up and down, but traditionally those guys are going to be someone that is going to help your team in a huge way. Um, yeah, and then the steeplechase guys. I mean, Coleman and Singleton. It'll be interesting. I don't. I'm not quite as high maybe on them as you are, but I can see you can see the makings of some really potent, like maybe not low sticks, but at least top end scorers.
Don't get me wrong, they were very frustrating to analyze last year.
Yeah.
Like they just left points on the table at like a handful of meets. So I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I think they'll still have more potency. We will see. And then finally, I'm moving us to Providence, the Providence Women at number 8. They bring back Kimberly May, who had a breakout year across all 3 seasons last year. Shannon Flockhart comes back after a really strong spring and summer campaign. She was very stable top 70 score, I believe, at the last 2 national meets in cross country. And then they add Alex Millard, the 15-18 5K girl, who is just flat out fantastic across the board.
Yep.
And then they also get, Kenzie Doyle, the UMass Lowell talent who's run 15:27 for 5K. She's been a top 90, I want to say, national meet finisher before. I don't know if some of her performances lately have really quite matched the 15:27, but just simply having her is huge. I think they have
Yep.
a excellent top four, like four, and then if Jane Buckley from the 2022 season, if she can get back, she's the X factor in all this. If she comes back and is in top form, then this team is going to be a podium squad.
Easy.
But we just don't know that. Yeah, easily. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Millard is kind of up there too. Like, I mean, if he hits the ground running and is like, I mean, you could argue she could be a top 20 runner if she's running at her best and right away. It might not matter all that much. They might be a podium team no matter what Buckley does, because they just have such a good front group, and they have good enough depth. They have good enough options in the back end. But yeah, you're right. I mean, Buckley changes this whole team if she's anywhere near where she was a couple years ago.
Yeah, I agree. And then Laura Mooney, another name. They've had a few like really solid back end runners, but Laura Mooney has a lot of upside, and she had a very nice spring campaign. So there's kind of hope there that maybe, hey, if someone has an off day, Mooney's going to be more than serviceable enough to
Sure.
step into a role there. And so yeah, I think we like Providence. We have a lot of questions about Providence, about some of their new additions, and that's why we're a little hesitant. But otherwise, I think this is an appropriate spot.
I mean, they have the highest ceiling, which is, I mean, not surprising of any team that we've talked about so far,
Yeah.
and that's ultimately why they're eighth. This is a team that like not only could finish like, dare I say, second if everything goes well.
Okay. I'd have to think on that a little bit more, but yeah, it's my if everything goes perfectly theory. So
Yeah, there you go.
all right, but that's I think all we got, right? That's it.
That's it. Next week we'll be back with more team rankings, and I'm sure there very well could be some breaking news that we'll get to. But until then, Garrett, I'll talk to you.
I'll talk to you.